The Chosen. You either hate it or you love it. It's the crowd-funded TV show about Jesus that is taking over the world. Their goal is to get to 1 billion people in the world through their show. They're all the way funded through season 3. They've got 7 seasons planned. It's the first multi-season show about Jesus. But is it any good? And I know that there's a lot of Mormon influence. Is this a show that Christians should be watching? We're going to talk about it. We're going to unpack it right now. I personally first came across The Chosen when they first put out their Christmas special, which was, I believe, called The Shepherd. It was like a pilot episode for the series, and it just depicts, in the same way that the whole show does, and this is one thing that I really do love about it, it depicts the nativity story from the perspective of somebody who was not central to the story. It's like this hour-long special, and Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, who are the central characters, of course, to the nativity story in the Bible, only get about 4 or 5 minutes of screen time. The rest of it is all this context, and it's just one of the things I love about it, as well as the cinematography. It's gorgeously shot. It's really well done. But I watched this thing and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I didn't know how badly I needed some kind of really well shot historical fiction that takes into account the historical context of what it would have been like to live in Rome-occupied Israel in the 1st century, and really tell this story in a really compelling way that works for modern sensibilities of art. Because I'm going to be frank with you, I love the Bible. I absolutely love the Bible, but it does not tell stories the way that modern Westerners do. If you read a book like Harry Potter or The Hunger Games, or let's really shoot high, The Lord of the Rings, the way that those stories work is that you have to know all the details of what people are thinking, how they looked, what they were seeing, what the landscape looked like, what they were discussing between each other in excruciating detail. It'll give you exact dialogue. All of these things that are really important for us to understand the story. We like omniscient storytellers. We like all of this stuff. And that's just not the way the Bible tells stories. The way that the Bible tells stories is it will tell you what happens, just the facts. And if the Bible wants to give you a way of thinking to make sense of what's happening in a story, it will connect back to other stories through the use of repeated words so that you pick up like a design pattern where, okay, here's an example. In Genesis 3, Eve sees the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which she's been forbidden from eating. She sees the fruit on it, that it is good of sight, right? It's good to look at. It's pleasing to the eye. And so she reaches out and she takes it. So we've got 3 words: see, good, take. Those same 3 Hebrew words get used in later stories. The biblical authors do this all the time, where they call back to that story in a way that they want you to make sense of it now. So for instance, with Abraham and Sarah and Hagar. So Abraham and Sarah they've been told by God that they're going to have a son, but they don't really know how that's going to work out because they're both really old. So Sarah comes up with this idea that what Abraham should do is take their Egyptian servant girl, Hagar, and sleep with her in order to get a child. And so Sarah sees Hagar, that she's good, and she takes her and gives her to her husband, Abraham. She's the forbidden fruit in this story. She represents the same thing that the fruit did on the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is if Eve leaves that fruit on the tree, she's trusting God's definition of right and wrong. But if she takes that fruit for herself and eats of it, she's seizing autonomy to define right and wrong for herself. Sarah does the same thing. She thinks, well, God promised this, but that's obviously not possible because I'm really old and we need a son in order to pass down our inheritance in order for this thing to continue going. So I think this is crazy, but this is just people do crazy things. She says, I'm going to take our slave. I can see her. I see that she would be good for childbearing, and I'm going to take her and give her to my husband. Same thing happens when the people are trying to get a king and they look at King Saul. Saul was like the prototypical king back then. He was tall. In fact, this is the only time the description of Saul matters, his physical description. They say that he's a head taller than all the other men, meaning he's big and strong and tall and handsome, which is exactly what those people are thinking. Oh, we need a guy like that to be our king. So they see that they see that he is good looking, that he has a good appearance of a king, and they take him to be their king. In that particular instance, too, there's that weird story about him hiding in the luggage. That is literally the same word for hiding that is used in the Genesis 3 account for Adam and Eve hiding after they recognized that they were naked and they had this new intelligence and this new understanding. So my point is that the Bible tells stories in a very different way. We'll riff on that another time because that's a really wonderful conversation. Now, let me give you an example of the way that the Bible tells stories. There's this really interesting passage in Luke chapter 4. And you're gonna read it and you're gonna be like, wow, that was really sparse on details. It starts right here in verse 38. It's actually only 2 verses. Here it's what it says. And he, that's Jesus, arose and left the synagogue and entered Simon's house. Now, Simon's mother-in-law was ill with a high fever, and they appealed to him on her behalf. And he stood over her and rebuked the fever, and it left her, and immediately she rose and began to serve them. That's it. The Bible, especially in the Gospels and really any of the narratives, has a very just the facts, ma'am, kind of approach to it. Jesus gets up, leaves the synagogue, gets to Simon's house. Simon's mother-in-law is sick with a fever. They appeal to him on her behalf, saying, hey, can you heal her? He stands over her, rebukes the fever, it leaves her, she rises up and begins to serve them. Now, if I were a modern Westerner and I were writing this story, I would include details about the countenance of Jesus as he's thinking through what he's going to do, the way that the apostles, or the way that not the apostles, the disciples come up and ask him specifically, the way that how were they appealing to him? What did they say? What were they thinking? What time of day was it? What did Simon's house look like? What did the drapery look like along the stone windows? All these things, right? None of that is here. And so a lot of people read the Bible and this is the kind of thing that bores them. And I think that that's unfortunate because what we need to do is learn to appreciate the way that the Bible tells stories for its own sake and then to allow that to shape our thinking. But it's also helpful for us to have furniture to put in place in our mind to sanctify our imagination, to give us more to latch onto when it comes time to think about how these things work. So then you watch The Chosen, and what they've done is they've created this very plausible, very easy to understand backstory where you have all of these background situations that give context to what was happening perhaps in Simon's life, right? This is Peter, and you get to meet Peter's wife, and it's this really emotional scene, and there's just this incredible emotional experience that happens when you see Simon's mother-in-law get healed. You get to feel the emotional weight of Jesus's compassion in this scenario, and it's beautiful.
Who are you?
I'm just going to come right out with it and say that I think that The Chosen is one of the best things that has happened in Christian art for a long time, maybe the best in the past 100 years. Why do I think that? The entire approach of the show is to give an authentic Jesus, a Jesus who is not a white, blonde-haired or brown-haired, blue-eyed European dude. A depiction of Christianity in the first century that isn't a bunch of white people walking around reciting the King James Version to each other. The creative team behind The Chosen, and we're going to get to them again in a minute, has gone to great lengths to make sure that they have grasped as much of the first century context as possible. Jesus stepped into a world in motion. It's not a history document. It's not a history book. He stepped into a real embodied world that had thousands of years of history before this. He occupies a place in the story that is built on thousands of years of expectation from the Jewish people. Everything that you read in the Old Testament in the Christian mindset points to Jesus. We don't just read the New Testament for the letters so that we can contextualize the gospel to our circumstances and our situation. We're trying to encounter Jesus, and there is no replacement for scripture in that pursuit. The word of God is living and active and sharper than any two-edged sword. Nothing can replace that. But one thing that The Chosen has done for me and countless others is that it has provided a historically accurate, plausible, easy to understand, unburdened by strange obstacles to understanding the original intent of the message, depiction of Jesus and his disciples and followers that is true to the original context and yet winsome and beautiful and understandable in our modern context. They've hired first century historians and experts on staff for their production crew so that they can say, we're about to mention the Maccabean revolt, which we know happened between X and Y years. What sort of expectations led up to that, and what sort of things flowed from that in the Jewish community that we might not be aware of? And then they weave that into the show. What are the cultural customs? What are the things that are in the cultural understanding of a first century Jewish person living in Rome occupied Israel? And they go to such painstaking detail and effort that this is exactly what you would expect a first century situation to look like in that day and age. The only white people are the Romans. There's nothing wrong with white people. I'm white. I love white people. But that's not historically accurate. Jesus looks more like my brother-in-law, who is shorter, has brown skin, and black curly hair. He looks more like that than he does me. I say looks because he still looks like that in his glorified body. It's the same thing. Now, the controversy comes in because a lot of people have been taking note of the fact that the creative team outside of the showrunner has some Mormon influence and some Mormon direction in there. And there's a lot of suspicion about, okay, well, are these people influencing the show with LDS theology? Are they kind of putting in their own spin on this thing to where they're trying to say, like, okay, what does Mormon theology teach? Well, Jesus is a created being. He's the brother of Satan. He's all this stuff, right? Are they putting any of that in there? What direction is the influence flowing? That's the question that I always ask. If there is a person who is a believer in a creative endeavor or working with other people who are not believers or who believe false things about Jesus, what direction is the influence flowing? In this case, are the Mormon folks that are involved, like Daryl Eves, who's really big in the YouTube space, or any of the other people like Angel Studios, the people like VidAngel, they're like a Mormon company. Are these people who have these beliefs, are their beliefs influencing the direction of the show and what is coming to pass in the way that they're telling the story? Or is the influence flowing the other direction, where Dallas Jenkins, the son of Jerry Jenkins, this is a wild story for another time, but Dallas Jenkins, is his influence coming over and changing the way that these people think? And the evidence is way, way, way stronger in this side. I went over it with a fine-tooth comb. I have not seen anything theologically that would make me say, it sounds like Mormons. And I know Mormon theology pretty well too, so I know what to look for. Dallas Jenkins is doing something really brave and really difficult, and he's been catching a lot of flack for it. He's working with a creative team on an explicitly evangelistic work of art, trying to faithfully depict Jesus that we know from the Bible in a way that's winsome. And even the way that he and the creative team are working is intended to be winsome to outsiders. In fact, they just put out a video just the other day that I think puts this on display in such an incredible way. I'd like to show it to you. They gathered together 9 Gen Zers and had them binge watch The Chosen. I'm not sure how much they watched. They're still putting this out there. But this is just a little preview of their reactions and their responses. Now, Gen Z, if you know anything, is very skeptical of religion. They're burned out on religion. They've experienced all kinds of strange things in the churches. They've got a lot of church hurt. They've got a whole culture that is telling them that everything that has to do with religion, especially Jesus, is suspect, is something that they should be scoffing at and reviling, certainly not accepting. They've got a whole set of political beliefs that are way more important to them and that supersede anything that they might believe about life, the universe, and everything in a religious context. And so it is to these kinds of people that they gathered 9 of them and showed The Chosen. And I'm just going to play the video and we're going to look at what the result was.
I chose not to believe in anything. And I said, if I want to believe in God, I'd have to believe in aliens and Sasquatches and the Loch Ness Monster and stuff like that.
I think if Jesus were here right now, I wouldn't be ready to meet him. I feel guilty for so many things, and I just don't feel like I'm at a place where I'd be okay facing him.
I like to assume the best in people, and so when I'm in church, every time I see people, I always assume that they have their lives together, and I'm just like, here.
Okay, you can hear the pain in their voices, you can hear the confusion, you can hear the worry, and really the fear surrounding anything religious. They have deeply held moral beliefs. It's not that they're immoral people, they're incredibly moral. It's just that their morals, they think, come from something like a humanist frame. There's a whole bunch we could discuss, but we'll have to talk about Gen Z more in detail another day, because I love Gen Z, man. They've got heart. But they've got 9 of these people together, and all of them are from Gen Z, and they're watching The Chosen.
Religion quite often is something that we've been a little disenchanted by.
I'm not deeply
into the faith like I used to be.
I don't want to serve a God that condemns good people to hell.
What if I just die and burn it for eternity, you know, because maybe they were right.
I was saying to God, like, am I an awful person? And I just couldn't hear God's voice about it.
I have so much doubt. What is the point of life? Why am I here? Do I even want to still be here?
It was so intense to be dropped into a group where everyone had such a complex relationship with God and with Christianity.
The experience was unlike anything I've really experienced before.
Not knowing what religious TV show we're about to sit on a couch and binge watch with random strangers.
We don't care if you love it, hate it. We hope you can at least relate to it. Help us understand what's happening here.
Here are some scenes from the show itself. Look at their faces. Look at their reactions. That's Nicodemus. Mary Magdalene. There's Jesus, the actor who plays Jesus, you guys. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
I'm in.
I did not expect that.
This is not what I thought it was gonna be, but it brings you in.
It reminded me a lot of like Thanksgiving time with my friends.
I mean, it seems cool, but I feel like very wary about entering into that domain again. I'm kind of terrified of going back to church because I felt like no one protected me.
When I was little, I would pray and I felt like I wasn't heard.
I really have struggled in loving myself.
I had to leave, and like I was in an awful life situation.
The fact that like Jesus is in here and he's saying, well, I came here for you. It was big. I really liked that.
If Jesus can love me, then I should be able to love me. God is calling you.
There are people I've had in my life for years that don't know me like this.
Well, they're about to.
Oh, I could go on. So just think about this for a second, okay? I love what just happened. I watched that video like 5 times, and I'm still about to cry. That is the impact that the biblical story has on people. The Chosen in no way replaces the Bible itself, but the story that the Bible is telling is the best news you've ever heard. We live in a world that for thousands of years has been suffering. Humans themselves have caused a lot of that suffering. And a lot of those humans have done so in the name of God that they supposedly serve. And that's difficult to say, but it's true. But the fact of the matter is that God himself is so unimaginably, immeasurably good that all you need to do is find a way to put him on display, and it'll make all of the difference. We think that the way to put Jesus on display is to, for instance, have people read Paul's letters, and there's great power in that. But what if we put Jesus on display by living out what Paul's letters tell us to do, and then put that in front of a watching world? What if rather than just expecting people to read the Gospels, we depict the story that those Gospels tell, with a Jesus that was so winsome, so moving, so easy to like, who liked people who were nothing like him, and who people that were nothing like him couldn't help but like? What if we put a Jesus like that on display, and then people simply react to it? People have all kinds of problems with the church. People have all kinds of problems with organized religion. It is very difficult to have a problem with Jesus. So should Christians watch The Chosen? Yes. Absolutely, they should watch The Chosen. That doesn't mean that you should put it on the same level as Scripture. For the Christian, The Chosen is not your life and your daily bread. Jesus is, and you encounter him through your own relationship with the Scriptures. But I can't tell you how blessed I've been by watching The Chosen. And I know all of the things to look for to check and see if this is doctrinally sketchy and iffy. And I walked away from the first episode crying a river, so blessed. I can't tell you how blessed I was. They're working on the 3rd season now. They've got 7 seasons planned. The first 2 are out. They're free to watch. It's absolutely incredible. Not only should you watch The Chosen, you should introduce your non-Christian friends to Jesus through The Chosen. People have to know that you care before they care what you know. And all the Bible knowledge we have, all of the evangelizing that we do, all of the church services we invite them to are laden in this day and age and in this culture with so much weight and so much fear and so much tension among those who have been burned by religion before, then maybe what we need is a completely different approach and a news that actually sounds like good news. If you want to prep for that conversation, if you do have somebody you've got in mind that you want to show this, that you want to show The Chosen to, again, I highly recommend it. But you want to know about what to talk about afterwards, then go ahead and watch this video right up here. And we're going to talk about what the good news really is that the Bible is talking about for the future of the world. Further up and further in.